There is no individual that has dedicated their career to improving the lives of Gorlin Syndrome patients, as well as those suffering from the burden of the development of basal cell carcinomas. Following in his father's footsteps, Dr. Epstein has spent his entire career in dedication to these patients. His accomplishments in this field are not only vast but groundbreaking. Discoveries including identifying the genetic defect responsible for Gorlin syndrome, the development of the knockout mice allowing researchers around the world to conduct studies are just two of his major accomplishments. Armed with this knowledge and working in conjunction with pharmaceutical companies, Dr. Epstein's efforts will benefit all Gorlin syndrome patients around the globe to not have to endure mutilating surgeries. We all owe a great deal of gratitude for him for his dedication and amazing accomplishments. I first met Dr. Epstein by way of an email solicitation I received from him asking if he could advertise on a website I had created in support of Gorlin syndrome patients. Having already been familiar with much of his career researching BCCs and his publications on the subject, I honored his request by letting him know that I was glad to make his acquaintance and that I would be happy to place anything he wanted on the website for free. Even prior to meeting Dr. Epstein, I had already placed a link to his publications on the website. Later, with his consent, I added all of his contact information as a researcher who was very familiar with the disorder and has an interest in continuing his efforts. Eventually, I combined my efforts with that of Christy Schmidt-Burr to form the BCCNS Life Support Network. We hosted the first ever meeting of Gorlin syndrome patients in the USA. Dr. Epstein, along with his colleague at the time, Dr. David Vickers, were the first to agree to join us as speakers for the event. They presented, along with Professor Robert Gorlin, Dr. Alan Oskarov, Dr. David Lynch, and several others at the top of the Gorlin syndrome research community. Here's Dr. Epstein presenting at another meeting we held in the Bay Area a few years later. Over the years, nobody has been more generous with participating and presenting at our meetings. Year after year, sometimes several times annually, Dr. Epstein took the time out of his very busy schedule and traveled at his own expense to support our organization, a fact that still remains today. His ability to describe a very intricate process with the syndrome into terms that anyone could understand is unsurpassed. He is always fantastic about adding some of his wonderful sense of humor to the task. On another visit, we had the opportunity to look at Dr. Epstein's laboratory, a chance to see where it all happens, and have an opportunity to meet the knockout mice that he developed to endure so much on our behalf. One of the photos taken that day he later submitted to a dermatologic publication and featured us on the cover of that magazine. On several occasions, Dr. Epstein, along with Dr. Vickers, hosted Gorlin syndrome member meetings at Columbia University. As always, Dr. Epstein took time away from everything else in his life to share with us. I can recall quite a few late evening calls from him wanting to speak personally to me to be certain that everything was understood. After a fairly lengthy conversation one evening, he capped it off by saying he was calling from France on vacation. This man never rests. To this day, Dr. Epstein continues to be a member of the Gorlin Syndrome Alliance's Medical and Scientific Advisory Committee and remains very active with the organization. Here's a shot from my most recent visit with him in Chicago of 2023, posing with Julie Brandheiser. His presentations are always loaded with great information, delivered in a very understandable manner and with loads of his fantastic sense of humor. So many reasons why I fell in love with this gent. I'm sure many of my reasons are similar to your experience. Gorlin syndrome patients, being the beneficiary of everything Dr. Epstein has done for us, can consider a few ways in which they can repay him. Be on the lookout for clinical trials as they come up and consider participating. Contributions to organizations such as the Gorlin Syndrome Alliance. To further research, please consider donation on his behalf. Perhaps send him a quick note to let him know that he and his achievements have impacted your life and how much you appreciate them. By the way, you may like to know that our feelings toward Dr. Epstein are mutual. If you are interested in discovering how he fell in love with Gorlin Syndrome, you can watch his presentation